I'm just wild about wildflowers, but have these performed as well as I thought they would this year? The garden home starts right after this. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, a show about garden design and blurring the lines between inside and out. Now you may be asking yourself, why do I have lawn furniture out here in the orchard? Well, I'll tell you why. I want to enjoy up close and personal all of these gorgeous wildflowers that are in bloom today. You see, last year I planted a seed mix that just didn't work for me. We had too much drought, so I decided to try another seed mix and hope for better results. Now this blend you see behind me was specifically designed for this part of the world. And you need to remember that when you're sowing wildflower seeds. The seed have to match your part of the world. Now this blend is doing so well because of several reasons. One, we had the right mix, we planted them in the fall, we made good soil to seed contact, and we had plenty of water, and just look at the display. Come on, let me take you around. This all started with a bag of seed like this. Just look at the seed. Doesn't look very inspiring, does it? But just look what those seeds produce. In this bag, there are about 35 different varieties of wildflowers, and you can see them blooming across here. Now, it started with the soil being prepared, and we broadcast the seed across here in November. Actually, it was in late October, early November. We had plenty of rain after that, and soon after they were broadcast, the little seedlings began to germinate. And throughout the winter, these wildflowers grew and grew until spring came along, and you saw this great push up. They began to set buds, and now you can see such a range of color and bloom. Just here in my hand, I have a Shirley poppy, 2 colors of cornflower, and this is an annual baby's breath. Other flowers you see here include cosmos, both in bright pinks, magentas, and whites, as well as the orange cosmos. There are California poppies and bright red Flanders poppies, as well as African daisies. So you're seeing it all now, this wildflower mix in bloom. But just a few months ago, the daffodils were the stars of the show, and the tiny seedlings were waiting in the wings, so to speak. Here, let me show you. So much of gardening is experimenting, and what you see here is one big experiment. I took an area and filled it in with 12,000 daffodils last year. You can see they're in full glorious bloom today. I just wish you could smell the aroma. It's truly fantastic. But you may be asking yourself, well, Alan, that's great, but after these flowers fade, what is it going to look like? Well, of course, the foliage has to die back naturally if I want blooms like this next year. But what I did last year is I overseeded this entire area with 3 types of wildflowers: larkspur, cornflowers, and poppies. Now, if you look closely among the daffodils, you can see the little seedlings germinating. They're all throughout this entire area. So in about 4 to 5 weeks, I should have another wave of glorious color here. And that's where we find ourselves today, in the middle of a sea of wildflowers blooming in parts of the garden. The orchard, as you've seen, and on Daffodil Hill, the big show is the larkspur. I think it's found a place where it's very happy, and I'm happy because this idea of overseeding has really worked in this particular area. Now, one thing to keep in mind when overseeding with wildflowers is, remember, they bloom at various times of the year. So choose your wildflower mixes or your varieties of wildflowers where they will bloom early, mid, and late through the entire season. I've had a fondness for wildflowers and North American native plants since my days as a student in England. You see, during one of my many informative chats with Lady Elizabeth Ashbrook, she noted that it was funny to her that it seemed that the Europeans appreciated American wildflowers more than we did in American gardens. In fact, Lady Ashbrook's garden at Arley Hall was full of flowers that I recognized from home. Lady Ashbrook, the first time people see this border, when they come around the corner, it's such a surprise.
Yes, I think it is. I do very often notice them stop here and almost cough.
Yes, they do. I mean, it's so beautiful, the color, and it's so intense.
Well, I think the sheer size of it is unusual.
You have to believe that it was designed this way.
Oh yes, yes. It was designed this way, but of course not divided up into these beds.
A herbaceous border is made up of a tapestry of perennial plants, usually the smaller ones in front and the taller ones in the back. But Lady Ashbrook feels that strictly following this rule of thumb can become too monotonous, so she mixes things up by allowing noticeable breaks in the rhythm of the plants.
I think it's much better to break it up like it, but I think equally it's essential to have a few tall, noticeable plants soaring up at the back to emphasize its width. And
right.
Yeah.
And in the back here we have the Scotch thistle and these big tall rudbeckias.
Yes.
And of course the American eupatorium, the Joe Pye weed.
Oh, is that what you call it?
Yes, ma'am.
Eupatorium, there's a purple and a white.
That's right, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm always astonished when I come to these herbaceous borders in Britain to see so many American native plants in them.
Yes, I'm very interested. I hadn't realized how many plants we owe to America.
Well, they seem right at home here and very happy.
Yes.
Lady Ashbrook, thank you so much. It's been marvelous being here again.
Well, it's been lovely seeing you, Alan. It always is.
A week or so after touring Arley with Lady Ashbrook, I found myself at the Kokenhof Garden in Holland, where I met up with a famous Dutch horticulturist who took great pleasure in showing me the array of North American natives that they were growing in a national display garden of the Netherlands. Look at this splash of color. You know, there's so many good perennials that will perform all throughout the summer.
Yes.
Yeah, this is an old friend from home.
Rebecca, and how do you call it in American?
Well, this would be a black-eyed Susan.
Oh,
yeah. You Europeans have taken American natives and improved them, and now we're growing them back at home in our gardens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They are hybridized, they are selected, and now they give more flowers, I think.
Yeah.
And the colors are perhaps a little better.
Yeah. And there's so many other examples here.
Eupatorium, I suppose.
Yeah, the big tall Joe Pye weed. Yes, I grow it in my garden as well.
And Tradescantia.
Yep, the spiderwort. Yep, a very good shade plant.
And phlox, of course. We have hundreds of varieties, cultivars in fact, from phlox, summer phlox and goldenrod.
Yes, that grows very tall in the States. You have the short dwarf ones here. And of course, one of my all-time favorites is the purple coneflower. You know, I think this is a good example of one of those perennials that was a wildflower in America. It was selected by Europeans. The Germans developed it into a beautiful cultivar and then sent it back to America. It's a very good garden plant. You know what them and Lady Ashbrook have to say about our American wildflowers really makes a lot of sense to me. And I try to use as many of them as I can in my landscapes. For instance, take a look at this. This is a Coreopsis lanceolata. But this one is called Early Sunrise. It has a consistent height, it's more compact, and look at all of the blooms. Take a look at this beautiful improved Gaillardia or blanket flower. This one's called Oranges and Lemons. Again, more compact, more flowers. So what the hybridizers have done is they've taken our wildflowers and they've improved them through crossbreeding and selection. Now let me show you a flower that's been a real showstopper in my garden, and it's completely unimproved, meaning that no one's done crossbreeding with it. This is called Bishop's lace. Looks like Queen Anne's lace, doesn't it? Well, it's not, but it is grown from seed. It's fantastic. Just look at this umbel-shaped flower and how pure the white flowerets are. Now, this one is not improved, just as this larkspur is unimproved. And then its cousin over here, the delphinium. This is a new hybrid called the Guardian series. And because of hybridization and selection, this particular variety can grow in my Zone 7 Mid-South garden. Before, I couldn't grow it, but now I can. I can have the wild and the improved delphinium. Now, if you'd like to see another example of what hybridization can do, take a look at the wild daisy in this bed across the garden. You can see this is the flower we see growing in meadows and along roadsides. It was actually introduced by English colonists in the 17th century, but we consider it a wildflower. And look at it compared to this new modern hybrid. This variety is called Broadway Lights. Just look at the size of the blooms. When they begin to open, they're butter yellow, and as the blooms mature, they turn a creamy white. So thanks to people who are passionate about plants, namely those plant breeders and hybridizers, I can have larkspur or annual delphinium in my garden, as well as the hybridized ones. Now let's go back to this idea of starting wildflowers from seed for just a moment. Julie Holland is a wildflower expert who knows a thing or two about using these plants to solve problems in the garden. In her years of working with wildflowers, she's come up with a way to define the plants that she uses in her landscape.
Wildflowers can be defined in different ways, and so we have our own definition that we feel is pretty correct. Wildflower is anything that will naturalize in an area given a start. And what a naturalized flower is one that did not originate here, but that is maybe from Europe. Say Queen Anne's lace is a naturalized wildflower. It's originally from Europe, but it's certainly naturalized here so that it would fool you into thinking it's one of our native wildflowers. Wildflowers are great for specific areas, like if you have a dry spot or maybe out around a mailbox where you're not going to water it or anything. You can choose flowers like black-eyed Susans. You can grow those just about anywhere. But for shaded areas, you can use things like Dame's Rocket, Rocket Larkspur, Baby Blue Eyes, Five Spot. There's a lot of things that you can use seed into shaded areas where you may be not able to get grass to grow. Other areas that are difficult sometimes are wet areas, and we have a pretty good selection of flowers that'll do well in wet areas. Coreopsis is good in a wet area. The Dame's Rocket is good in a wet area. Purple coneflower is one that's very versatile. You can use it in shade, you can use it in wet soil, dry soil, sun. Planting a wildflower garden is a little bit different than just going to the garden center and picking out what looks pretty and plugging it into the ground. You have to kind of have some foresight and decide what the effect is that you want, and then choose things that will grow in that area. Like if you want to have a field of a little small bed of California poppies, say, you should put those in about March, and then you're going to have blooming poppies all summer long. Others are a little more complex. If you want larkspur, for instance, larkspur likes to be seeded at the end of the summer and sit in the ground through the hot, cold, and then the warming again before you're going to get a blooming flower. Now when you are doing seeding, you want to seed in times when you're hoping that it's going to rain, or if you have irrigation and can water, you can seed anytime. So there's a little bit more, thought processes going into wildflower gardening.
Let me introduce you to what is called a hardy volunteer. This is larkspur. It's an annual that's so vigorous it reseeds itself in my garden every year. You see, that's why they call it a hardy volunteer. It behaves almost like a perennial. Now, I started these 3 years ago with a single packet of seed like this, and they just keep coming back each spring. Now, how's that for some easy garden planting? Other hardy volunteers that I grow in my garden are bachelor buttons, nicotiana, cleome or spider flower, and globe amaranth. And the pink flowers of the showy primrose always make a splash around my garden pool. I like the way these plants come up randomly among the more established shrubs and perennials in my flower beds. Now, there are a few tips you'll need to know to encourage these volunteers to come back year after year. First, it's important to learn to identify the seedlings so you don't pull them up as weeds. And second, you don't want to put down too much mulch and smother the seed. Once you learn to identify volunteer seedlings, your garden can always be full of many surprises. And what a great way to let Mother Nature lend a hand in the design of your garden. Now you hear a lot these days about fighting weeds before they become a problem, and yes, certainly pre-emergents are a great way to get a jump start on weed control, because what you hope to do by putting out these controls, you can actually keep weed seeds from germinating and thereby eliminating the need to spray herbicides later. But be warned, no matter what type of pre-emergent you use, it'll have the same effect on some of those desirable volunteer plants in your garden. If you love wildflowers and you want to use them indoors in flower arrangements, it's certainly something I recommend. But there's some things you need to know for the best success. The first thing, I think, is to manage your expectations. You see, wildflowers are not going to hold up in a vase like a store-bought flower or even hybrid flowers that you might grow in your garden. They're wildflowers, all right? They're very ethereal. They're not going to last long. Now, with that set aside, there are a few things you should know. One, cut them in the early morning. That's the best time. And put them immediately in cold water and get the water as close up to the flower head as you can. In other words, soak the stems all the way up. And keep them out of bright sunlight. They'll last much longer that way. You can do single bouquets of one variety, like these gorgeous Shirley poppies. And one other tip, pick them when they're very fresh, like this one. You can see it's just beginning to open. Or you can do bouquets that represent a wide array of wildflowers. No matter how you like them, just bring some inside and enjoy a touch of nature indoors. Now, speaking of enjoying things inside, let's step inside the Garden Home Retreat and see how construction is progressing. The views out into the garden are really remarkable from these twin buildings. The guys are making incredible progress. What they've done on the inside is they've placed some large beams, which are going to give it a really rustic feel, both in this building and the summer kitchen on the other side, which is the exact same size as this structure. Now, the other thing that they're doing is they're getting ready for the windows. Mark Eds is a construction expert, and he's been consulting with us on how to get this seal just right.
When building or remodeling a home, it's important to provide superior protection around your windows and doors. Whether you're remodeling and replacing your windows or whether you're building a new home with new windows, water can easily find its way around these windows and door openings. Particular systems are available to mold and to stick and flash into these bottom corners of the window opening. As you can see, the bottom corners are of utmost importance. This is where water damage will be most likely to occur. Additional products are often used on the jambs and the heads of these windows to provide water from getting in behind that window and draining down to those bottom corners. Both together work to eliminate moisture problems when installed correctly.
The views from here are incredible. You can see the vegetable garden, the orchard beyond, and all of those spectacular wildflowers. Now, once the windows are in, they'll actually start with the siding. We'll be moving right along. Now, if you look at the main house, the stonemasons have wrapped all the way around the back, and they already have the piers in place supporting the porches. It's all very exciting. I have to say, it's a lot of fun for me to take photographs, many of them submitted by you, the viewer, and take a look at how we can transform them into a garden home. Now, here we have a beautiful little cottage in North Carolina that belongs to James. And what I'd like to do after looking at this is explore the idea of doing something that's strictly white, everything white. It would pick up the white trim of the house. I think it'd be really a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that I would do right from the start is create a border here across the front. And I'm thinking of about a 4-foot hedge, maybe shorter, with a break in it perhaps here and here, which would be an opportunity for some sort of gate. This would be an evergreen hedge, run across like this. Could be yew or boxwood, just as long as it's evergreen, like that. And I think that I see some stumps here. It's a little hard to tell. Here, 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 and here. I would take those plants out because they look like they're overgrown, and it looks like they may have been blocking this beautiful sunroom. Now, what I would add for screening is about 6 Savannah hollies with single trunks like this to hide these buildings beyond, because they're kind of a distraction to this front composition. And then in this space, I would fill in with some white azaleas here and also over here. Maybe Gigi Gerbing, maybe one called Snow, which is a caroom. And then to drop down here lower so it doesn't block the view of this garden room, I would do a white one called Gumpo, which blooms later, about 3 weeks later. Then on the corner down here, this is an opportunity for a flowering shrub. And here I would probably plant an old-fashioned mock orange. One called Natchez is very beautiful with its large white blooms, almost the size of a dogwood bloom. Now in the front garden over here on this side, with these hollies as a backdrop, I would plant a Chinese fringe tree. Now we have a native fringe tree called Chionanthus virginicus, but this is Chionanthus retusus, a beautiful plant, maybe a little difficult to find, but it's well worth it. Now you've got this railing up here on the porch, and you can see that. Let me just draw it here. It comes up and across like this and like this. I would match probably this railing with the gate. So if you decide to do the gate, probably do a pair of brick piers here and here in the same wrought iron motif. Now to soften this, what you could do is grow a white wisteria here, or you could grow the American wisteria, which has a much shorter bloom, and it's not nearly as aggressive as some of the oriental varieties. But I think having a vine growing up here would really be beautiful. And then I think that I would add some flagstone just into the turf, just irregular pieces that would carry the path all the way up to this walkway that comes across. Now you have liripe or mondo grass, it looks like, growing as a border along here. You could keep that because if it's liripe, it has a beautiful lavender flower in the late summer. But I would fill in back here with probably vinca minor or Asian jasmine. And right across the front of these azaleas, I would plant some sort of fern, maybe southern wood fern. It's a beautiful, beautiful color of green. And then right here at the front, I would create a pocket of color for annual plantings. Now, the front of your house faces the south, so plant something like white begonias would be really beautiful all summer long here in front of the house. I hope this is a help to you, James. You have a beautiful home, and I think this white theme would be a perfect fit. If you're thinking about sprucing up your yard or patio this year and think you could use some help from a professional, a little preparation ahead of time can save you time and money. When people come to me for advice about their gardens, I always tell them I'll need 3 things to help them achieve the look they want in their garden. The first thing you'll need to do is to have an idea of what you want. Visit your local garden centers to see what plants catch your eye, and clip magazine articles that reflect a style that suits your taste. Second, take photographs of your home or the area you're thinking about landscaping. A picture is worth 1,000 words. By showing a garden designer or a nurseryman a photograph, they can take things into consideration like the color of your house or plants you may already have. The last thing is accurate measurements of the area. A plot plan or survey of your property is a great base to work from. So in review, basically what you need are ideas of the things you like, photographs of the area under consideration, and accurate measurements. When you're scratching your head over that landscape project this spring, remember, when it comes to creating really beautiful gardens, you can save a lot of time and money by being prepared, and you'll stand a better chance of getting what you really want. Well, as you can see, I am wild about wildflowers, and I hope you enjoy today's show as much as I have. You know, there are a few things you want to keep in mind if you try growing some wildflowers, whether you're planting 40 acres or a 4-foot square bed. That is, make sure you get the right seed for your area. Make sure you get good seed-to-soil contact. Plant them at the right time of the year. Many of these wildflowers should be planted in the fall, and give them adequate moisture. But most of all, sit back and enjoy them. From the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Alan Smith's Garden Home.
They're the backbone of many successful gardens, so you have to wonder, why are shrubs so misunderstood and underestimated? We'll take a look at a property that I've been working on for almost 2 decades, and we'll see the importance of a good framework. So hopefully after the show, you'll have a much greater appreciation for those oh so important shrubs in your garden.